Hello everybody! Zdravím všechny příznivce anglické výslovnosti a dnes zde vítám především naše studenty prvního ročníku, kteří mají v jarním semestru zapsaný předmět Fonetika a fonologie B. Jeho součástí jsou i přednášky. Nicméně ty nemůžeme mít naživo, proto jsem se rozhodla, že jednu z přednášek nahraji jako video a zveřejním ji zde na svém YouTube kanále. Myslím si, že i pro některé z vás, běžné uživatele angličtiny, to bude třeba zajímavé podívat se na to, jak taková poměrně odborná přednáška z anglické fonetiky vypadá. Samozřejmě se nemusíte dívat na celou přednášku, rozhodně ale na celou přednášku by se měli podívat právě naši studenti. A abych to celé trošku odlehčila, protože nahrání této přednášky byla cesta opravdu hodně trnitá, tak jsem na závěr zveřejnila krátké bloopers a můžete se tak pobavit na můj účet. Teď už tedy především studenti, prosím, plně se soustřeďte, vemte si něco na psaní, dělejte si poznámky a pokud se pak budete chtít na něco zeptat, můžete tak učinit buď to v mých seminářích nebo v seminářích mé milé kolegyně. Let's get started! Hello everyone and welcome to today's lecture about English vowels. Let us revise a bit. So I've prepared a couple of questions and I want you to try to think about them for a bit and answer them. And the first question is, how many phonemes are there in English? Sorry for asking such easy questions, but still, it's always good to revise things. Practice makes perfect, right? So how many phonemes are there in British English? Well, let me just briefly show you this. I'm sure you all remember our lovely phonemic chart. And of course, there are 44 phonemes in British English. What is a phoneme? Do you still remember? Well, a phoneme is a regularly occurring sound. Let's have a look at the next question. And there are two subgroups. Okay, so I'd like to hear the main division of phonemes into two groups. So this is the one, and this is the other one. So try to think about these two groups and what do we call them? We can talk about vowels and consonants, or we can divide phonemes into vowels and consonants. How many consonants are there? So if you think about this section, so these are consonants, and do you still remember how many there are in English? Correct, 24. And last question here, how many vowels are there? Well, logically then there have to be 20 vowels. So if you look at this upper part, we could count 20 vowels and 24 consonants down here. Okay, there's still one more question. What's the main difference between consonants and vowels in terms of their production? So I'm sure you all remember a keyword that you need to use if you want to differentiate between vowels and consonants in terms of their production, how they're produced. What's the main difference between vowels and consonants? Still put down the word that I'm talking about, the keyword that I mean, and it is abstraction. So I'm sure you all remember now how to define or how to tell the difference between vowels and consonants. What is it? So, I think I can move on a bit. Yes, it is about the presence or absence of the obstruction to the airflow or of an obstruction to the airflow. Okay, so if you think about consonants and you try to produce any consonant sound, p, b, z, s, th, d. So do you think there's an obstruction to the airflow or not? P, b, z, s. Of course there is. So we can define consonants as sounds in which there's always an obstruction to the airflow. Obstruction, another word, could be a blockage. It means you block the air or you obstruct it when it is going out of your mouth. There can be different levels of an obstruction. For instance, if I produce p, how do I obstruct the air? Well, I put my lips together, I stop, and then suddenly the air is released. So first we stop the air for a bit, obstruct it completely, so there's a complete blockage, and then we release it. And that's why we talk about plosives, because you kind of explode. Whereas, for instance, if I say s, it's a fricative sound, so there's only a partial blockage. So, and there's friction going on. So you only partly block the air, but still there's an obstruction to the airflow, although there's less of an obstruction to the airflow. So remember that with consonants, there's always an obstruction to the airflow, be it a complete blockage or just a partial blockage. How about vowels then? If we think about vowels and we look at this area, so for instance, let me choose E, E. And if I say E, am I blocking the air in any way? No, I'm not. So, with vowels, there's no obstruction to the airflow. And this is very important to remember. There's no obstruction to the airflow when we talk about vowels, but there's always an obstruction to the airflow when we talk about consonants. Again, let me still stick with vowels for a bit. So if you think, for instance, about oo. So because there's no obstruction to the airflow, we can pronounce these sounds for as long as we wish. So this is the main difference between vowels and consonants. Well, having said that, it should be pointed out that the most important difference between vowels and consonants is not the way that they are made, but their different distributions. What do we mean by that? Well, if we talk about different distributions of sounds, then we talk about different contexts and positions in which particular sounds can occur. We would simply talk about different combinations that individual sounds can occur in, for instance, within a word. So, for instance, if we think about English and Czech, English doesn't like consonant clusters and there are certain limits to it, whereas in Czech, there are lots of words in which you can see really huge consonant clusters. So remember this, that of course we still need to differentiate between vowels and consonants in terms of their production, but what is even more important for a language as such is their different distributions of vowels and consonants, or of individual vowels and individual consonants within words, and how they can combine, how they can coexist. Different context and positions. Today's lecture is about vowels. So let us now mainly focus on vowels only, and let's try to answer this question: in what ways do vowels differ from each other? I'm sure you still remember, if we look at this area here, that we have front vowels and back vowels, but we also have closed and open vowels, and we can also describe different lip positions. So we can talk about the shape and position of the tongue, and we can also talk about the shape and position of the lips. Let's have a look at the first criterion regarding the classification of vowels, and it is tongue height. What do we mean by that? Well, this is the distance between the surface of the tongue and the roof of the mouth, which is so-called hard palate. To put it simply, we can talk about close and open vowels, right? So let me put it down here. If we talk about close vowels, I can tell you that close vowels are up here. So for instance, looking at E, it is a close vowel. Let us try to produce it. E, E. What can you see? My lower jaw is not dropping, it doesn't drop. So we can say that there's least space above my tongue, and it means that this vowel is close, right? So these are sounds with the least space above your tongue. E. You can see that the surface of your tongue is really close to the hard palate. However, if we move down here from top to bottom, so as I go down here, I would say E, and I end up with a very open mouth. So we can say that this sound is a very open sound, right? It is the open A, and that means that there's more space above your tongue. So open vowel sounds with the most space above your tongue. So this is the first criterion, that you can describe tongue height, whether there's a lot of space above your tongue or really little space above your tongue in relation to the hard palate. And we talk about close and open vowels. And we can always remember that close vowels are at the top, but if we move down, we arrive at open vowels. Again, you can try to compare. I is relatively close, but if I move down here and say so my lower jaw dropped, and of course this is an open sound. So this is the first criterion, and it is the tongue height. Let me put it down. Next, we can also discuss the part of the tongue that is raised. So this is another criterion that can help us classify vowels. And you know, since there's no obstruction to the airflow, it's actually kind of more slippery and more difficult to define vowels than consonants, because with consonants you can always describe the obstruction, the blockage to the airflow. But since there's none with vowels, it is kind of tricky, but at least we've got some of these features that we can still describe. The second criterion, this is the part of the tongue that is raised. And here we can talk about front vowels and central vowels and back vowels. Or we can also talk about frontness and backness, right? Frontness and backness. If we look at the phonemic chart, so then this would be moving from left to right. So on the left, you have front vowels. It means that the part of the tongue that is raised is the front part of your tongue. Again, let me illustrate. The open A sound, the trap vowel, A. It is described as an open and front vowel sound because it's really produced at the front of your tongue, or we can say that the front part of the tongue is raised. A, right? It's the front part of your tongue that is raised. That's why it's the front vowel. However, if we move, well, we can take this row and we can move from left to right. A, o. Well, you should feel that now, you know, if I'm saying O sound, it is the back part of your tongue that is raised. So here are relatively open vowels, and as we move to the right, so here there are back vowels. So the second criterion is frontness and backness. We talk about front and back vowels. And of course, as you can see here, there's also central vowels. So logically, if we look at this whole area, and we can imagine this is our mouth, right? So if we look in the middle, we can see the most famous sound of all, the famous schwa, and the most frequent one. And this is the central vowel. So schwa is relatively central, or is produced at the center of your tongue, right? It comes from the center of your mouth, and the long schwa too. So this was frontness and backness. We can also talk about the third criterion that we can use for a description of vowels, and this is the shape of the lips, or as you can see here, the shape of the lips. There can be three different shapes that we normally use when producing English vowels, and I put down initial letters of the adjectives that would describe these. So let us try to think about it together. Well, for instance, if we look at letter O, what is the shape of my lips? How would you describe my lip shape? O. It starts with the letter R, it's rounded, or rounded. So we can talk about rounded lip shape. Then the next one, so let me show it here as well. If you look at E, so let me talk about E again. So if you look at this vowel, E, how would you describe my lip shape? Or you can try on your own and see it too. E. S. Well, it could be smiley, but it's not the term that the phoneticians use, but they describe it as spread. So we can also talk about spread lip shape. And how about the last one? Well, the last one is related to the most famous and frequent sound of all, the famous schwa. And if I produce schwa, and I only say how would you describe its shape? Starting with the letter N, and it's neutral, correct. So this is neutral. So we've got these three criteria that we can use for a description of individual vowels. Tongue height, this is about close and open vowels. Okay, let me put it here. Close and open vowels. Then we've got frontness and backness. It means which part of our tongue is raised. So that's about front and back vowels. And then we can also describe the shape of the lips, and we can talk about rounded, spread and neutral vowels. And again, let me sum up. If you look at this area, so you know that if we look at it from left to right, we talk about front and back vowels. If we go from top to bottom, then we talk about close and open vowels. And of course, this is the central area where there's the famous central neutral schwa. We've just talked about different ways in which we can describe vowels. However, I only talked about this group. If you look here, you can see more vowels. So my question is, how can we divide English vowels? They can be divided into two groups. If you look at the phonemic chart, again, you can see there's a thicker line between these two groups. So we can talk about 12 monophthongs and 8 diphthongs. Correct. So don't forget that if we talk about English vowels, we should divide them into monophthongs and diphthongs. Monophthongs are so-called pure vowels, and diphthongs are vowels which consist of two sounds. So basically, each diphthong always consists of two monophthongs, but it counts as one phoneme. This is very important. It's one unit. Back to monophthongs, so this area. How can we divide them further? Well, of course, we can talk about short and long vowels. Very often, this distinction between short and long can help us make minimal pairs. Just to remember what minimal pairs are. So, for instance, if I've got ship, but sheep, so we've got minimal pair, which means these are two words that differ in only one phoneme, in only one sound. And very often it may be, for instance, the difference between long and short vowels. Not necessarily though, right? But here we can see the only difference between ship and sheep is the different vowel that is used. It's the short I, the kit vowel in here, but it's the fleece vowel in here. So this is about monophthongs, short and long vowels. If we look at diphthongs now, so you already know there are 8 of them, and you also know that a diphthong is a phoneme or a sound that consists of 2 parts, of 2 sounds, of 2 monophthongs. However, we have to remember that although it's got 2 parts and you can see 2 sounds in one phoneme, it's still regarded as one sound only. It's one unit. So this is very important. Now, another thing that we should bear in mind is the fact that there's a glide or slide from one vowel to another. So because it's a unit, so you can't say I, but you always put them together and you say ear. Similarly, you would say ua or air. So you need to glide or slide between them. And another important thing to remember is that the first part is always longer and stronger than the second one. Let me illustrate. Ear, ua, air. Or for instance, even these 3, a, oi, I. Can you hear it and can you feel it? I'm not saying a, but I say a. So remember this, that the first part is longer than the second part. The proportion is said to be about 60 to 40. Now, how do we divide diphthongs? Of course, again, there's kind of classification that we can talk about or that we can follow. And the thing is that we've got 3 centering diphthongs and 5 closing diphthongs. So as is written here, there's 3 centering diphthongs ending in the schwa, sound, and then we've got 5 closing ending either in I, there are 3 of them, a, oi, I, or in U, and there are 2 of them, O, R. Unlike monophthongs, which are organized according to where they're produced in our mouth and how open or close they are. So in terms of diphthongs, we organize them by the last sound. And why is it called centering or closing? Well, this is very easy because we've already covered monophthongs and their classification. So we talk about 3 centering diphthongs ending in schwa because schwa is a central sound. If you talk about this, or if we look at this area, so you know that schwa is right in the middle, in the center. That's why that the 3 diphthongs, ear, ua, air, are centering diphthongs because they end in schwa, and schwa is a central sound. And then you've got 5 closing diphthongs ending either in I or U. And why are they called closing? Well, because I and U, if you see them at the top, so I'm sure you still remember that these are close vowels. And that's why these 5 diphthongs which end either in I or U are closing diphthongs. Although we covered all 20 vowels here and we talked about their division into monophthongs and diphthongs, it should be pointed out that there are also so-called triphthongs. What are they? Well, as the title suggests, they will comprise 3 parts, but it's only one triphthong. And the combination is closing diphthong with the schwa added on the end. So, which means I've prepared it here already. So if you combine 5 closing diphthongs, and I hope you still remember me explaining closing and centering diphthongs. So there are 5 closing diphthongs here. So that means that we simply add the schwa. And why do we talk about these? Well, we talk about these sounds because they simply occur in English. So you should know that there's also triphthongs. There are 5 of them. And it's a combination of a closing diphthong with the schwa added on the end. So you've got these 5 combinations representing 5 triphthongs, and I want you to try to come up with some examples, just individual words. which you know that there'll be the combination of a closing diphthong with the schwa added on the end, and that makes a triphthong. Air, ire, oyer, ower, our. Have you managed to come up with at least one example for each triphthong? So don't forget there are 5 triphthongs. It's a combination of closing diphthong with the schwa added on the end. And we can now practice the pronunciation of individual triphthongs, or I mean the words that I provided. Player, liar, royal, lower, power. Don't forget that for British English, the final letter R that you can see in spelling is not pronounced. Here is the last slide, so we are nearly done. And I want you to try to think about the following question. Using the descriptive labels introduced for vowel classification, say what the English schwa is. So you can also try to think about the position of the schwa within the section of monophthongs, and then you look at the 3 criteria I talked about earlier today: tongue height, frontness, backness, and lip shape, and try to describe the most frequent and the most famous sound in English, the schwa, using the 3 criteria here. So give it a go. This is the answer. Schwa, if we look at the tongue height, would be described as mid, that is halfway between close and open, right? Because if you think about the schwa, and you know that there are closed vowels up here and open vowels down here, so we know that schwa is right in the middle, so it's halfway between close and open, so we can call it mid. If you think about frontness and backness, so again, going from left to right, again, it's more or less in the center, so we'll call it central because it's halfway between front and back. And how about the lip shape? I'm sure you all got it right because it's a neutral sound, and in general we can say that schwa is described as lax. There's no tension, there's no muscle tone, so that's why we can call it lax. So schwa is mid, central, neutral, generally described as lax. Well, this is all from me for today. Have a lovely time and take good care of yourselves. Thank you very much for your attention and see you soon. Bye. Takže za 5 minut 5, takže to budu muset střih. Teď. Let's have a let's. Teď. Tak. Teď nevím, jestli na to nevím. Teď. No, takže asi tak. Takže ještě jednou střih. Erase this. This group, and what we call that group. To je něco tak strašného. Now, if we talk about pure vowel, so it's a pure vowel. The most important thing to remember about all diphthongs is the position of I and U in here, about the kid and oh gosh, kid and foot vowel. Nah, I'm fed up. So even though you can see that there's, oh, it up.